Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodo. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Hi, and welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I am Tony Bodo.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer. We're glad you're here today.
Yeah, we are really excited about this podcast. We have with us Kim Moceri, and I hope I'm saying that right, Kim. She is the operating partner of Francisco Partners, and I'm really excited to have this conversation because as we were prepping for this, she was talking about how she moved from an operational role in customer service and customer success into a very strategic role. And she's got some really deep insights that we're going to talk about today. One in particular that I'm really excited about is her engagement framework that we briefly touched on. So I'm looking forward to exploring that some more.
Yeah, same. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. There's a lot of great stuff to talk about. So Kim, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Kim, we know a little bit about your background, but you've got a really interesting history, just all things customer. So can you just kind of walk us through your background and how you ended up at Francisco Partners, and then a little bit about the work that you're actually doing there?
Sure, absolutely. Most of my background has been customer facing to start with. I would say really out of college, I actually went to school for court stenography. So I wasn't expecting to be in this technology world that we're in today. But while I was studying for my state board, I started working in a software company, and sort of answering the phones was sort of the customer service person answering the phones and routing calls to the customer support team. So became really intrigued with customer support problems and working with customers. There, I just got in many, many different customer-facing roles, spent a lot of my career at RSA Security, cybersecurity company, working from, being a technical account manager to managing large organizations that were focused on customer support and customer success. From there, I, spent time going into operations, learning a lot about the business, but really missed working directly with customers. So I went back into the customer support world, managing over a 300-person organization, and really driving the importance of not just being a tactical support organization, but really building that relationship with customers, being more consultative and helping customers get to their outcomes. From there, we had a former CEO that had gone to a startup company, Click Software. I wasn't really looking to change my career. I really enjoyed what I was doing and being in the cybersecurity world. But what intrigued me about this opportunity at this startup company was they worked in field services. And what excited me was, all my career, I loved working with customers and solving their problems. But this was a unique opportunity where the way we serviced our customers would affect how they would service their customers. So not only was it important that we had to offer our customers a good experience, because if we didn't, then we affected how they did business with their customers. So that really, really intrigued me and brought me into the field services world, where it was a Francisco Partners owned company. And that's how I became affiliated with Francisco Partners.
So talk us through kind of the work that you're doing now, how you're helping clients or portfolio companies, and how your background is helping them now with the work that they're doing as well.
Yeah, so absolutely. The Francisco portfolio companies are like my customer now. And really, I'm working with them to drive best practices across the services side, as well as really customer success. I would say we have anywhere between 45 to 50 companies that we own and we invest in. And customer success is probably only known in about maybe 10 or less customers, right? I mean, they're more focused on professional services and support. So I'm really trying to drive the importance of customer success and how you engage with your customers and really focus more on their outcomes, right? And not just customizations and take a case, solve a case, next case, but how can you become strategic to your customers and help them throughout the life cycle to build those loyal customer relationships and ongoing long-term relationships.
So, Kim, what do you see as one of the common threads with those companies that you're working with on customer success? One of the common threads that you see that they're all challenged by?
I would say they're all challenged by, and I was challenged with it as myself at Click Software, was around being reactive, right? And not understanding that it's really about building that strategic relationship. And if you focus more on the adoption and the use of the solution and understanding what they consider success, then that will lead to retention and long-term relationships, as well as huge expansion and cross-sell opportunities. So again, I would say it's more around getting out of that reactive mode and being more strategic with your customers and understanding the engagement that they want with you.
I think that's such a key thing here. We see so many people in the customer experience world, the customer success world, talking about journey mapping and some very tactical things. They are very important, but a lot of people, even a lot of the experts, never really get to what I would say is a true strategic level when they're looking at the customer journey and at customer success as a whole. So could you take us through that? Kind of what's your perspective of the customer journey from a strategic perspective?
It is working with them on understanding their success plan, right? Why did they buy the product in the first place? I'm sorry. And what are their objectives? Right? Most of the times, again, we're being very tactical and customers are calling us, we're trying to solve a problem, and then we move on, versus really understanding what they consider success, right? And what are those different touch points throughout the journey? So most of the time we focus on that post-sales activity, but when they are onboarding, that's the most critical time, right? So understanding the success plans, working with them to drive those success plans, which allows you to be more strategic versus reactive, right? So it's, when you onboard them, understanding why they bought it, identifying what those measures are for them, which will drive the behavior and how you engage with them. So you're identifying and acting on those customer triggers based on what you identified at the onboarding phase.
Kim, take yourself back 14 months and what your world looked like then versus what it looks now as we're coming out of COVID. What are some of the big transitions or changes or dynamics that have just been very notable to you over the last year plus since we've been dealing with the pandemic?
I think it's realizing is how you stay engaged with your customer, right? If we just look at overall services, right? If we look at a customer success framework, which includes professional services, most folks thought that you couldn't be successful unless you were building those relationships by being on site, right? And that was how you built long-term relationships. And I think the things that we're seeing is that you can build relationships by being remote and that not everything needs to be on site. So it's, again, important that you identify those engagements and how the customer wants to be engaged and maintaining that journey for them by driving certain triggers, creating the right content, creating those right engagements with webinars and self-service and all of those things, right? Because people have realized they have to be more self-sufficient where people weren't available. So if you can build that content and create that model that is solving customer pain points, then you'll build that long-term relationship and have that strategic customer that's willing to work with you.
So as a follow-up to that question, what are you seeing that customers are preferring? Are they preferring more the customers themselves? Or are they really looking forward to having more of the face-to-face engagement? Because, speaking, Tony and I have talked about this as well. We're seeing it all over the board. It just kind of depends. And I'm just wondering if you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah, I was exactly going to say that. I think it kind of depends. I think more and more people, though, are going to go the remote way. And because that's the way people are satisfied in doing business, right? And again, we have to listen to our customers. I know certain portfolio companies are actually increasing their rates if they require on-site, which is driving more to that remote. But you have to make sure that you can still drive that proper engagement when you're doing the remote. And I do think it's possible for sure.
So it really comes back to those success metrics and understanding on the front end, what does success mean, not just for your client companies, your portfolio companies, but also for their customers. And can you deliver on that from a distance, from this remote setting? It's really interesting because your particular background really, I think, speaks to how you were doing this very early on. You talked about with us when we were prepping about Click software and how you had this particular way of engaging with the field representatives. And it was almost like, I don't want to say an end run around in a negative way, but it was a direct connection to the people that were in the field. So talk a little bit about that experience and maybe what you learned from that you can apply today.
Yes, absolutely. And it was because normally we wouldn't talk to the field representatives. Click software, as I had mentioned in our earlier conversation, was a field services software company, right? So we helped utility companies, big telecoms, big healthcare companies juggle complex logistics, rising customer expectations, and high cost of on-site operations, right? And we had some issues. We had some pain points in our product. So it was really important that we not only worked with the administrators of the system, but to get on the phones with the field service reps while they were at the customer site and see their challenges of what they were experiencing when trying to deliver their product to the customer, and how they interacted with the customer and how our product was hindering their ability to get the job done in a seamless way. So it was really important to have that connection. I mean, we were talking to folks that were picking up hospital beds, right? And making sure new hospital beds were getting placed in the right rooms. And they didn't have access to their mobile device to even know where it went, right? So we were becoming a high cost to serve, which was the complete opposite of what we were trying to do. So it was a great experience to be able to get in front of those people that were doing the day in and day out job, and how the interruptions in our service were affecting them to be able to do their job and service their customers. It was a great opportunity to fix those pain points.
I think that there's an element there in lean thinking or lean manufacturing, which is all about getting out there on the floor and seeing what's actually happening. I think this applies. I think we step away from it in the service world, I think, far too often, and we just try to do our journey maps and things in theory on the whiteboards. But I think there's a lot of power in being there, whether it's remotely, remoting in and seeing what's happening, or whether it's being right there side by side with your customers as they go through the journey. So great story. Thank you for sharing that one with us.
Absolutely.
So Kim, we talked a little bit about the need to be more proactive, but what are some of the other mistakes or challenges that you see just in general with the engagement process? What are some of the best practices that you're sharing with the companies that you work with?
So some of the best practices that I'm trying to enforce across the companies that I'm working with is the importance of identifying the right charter, right? Which is focusing on adoption, the value customers are getting out of the solution, which will lead to retention and those upsell, cross-sell opportunities. But the bigger thing, I think, is also ensuring you're getting the support from top down. We see a lot that from the post-sale side, we're trying to drive this initiative all on our own. And when you start a customer success team or function, the company thinks you own it all, right? But it really needs to happen from the top down. And most of the portfolio companies where we started on this journey, it's the CEO that has reached out to me, and it has been 100% bought in. And that's where we're seeing the absolute success and the right framework being driven and built, because it's a company initiative. And even though the function is owned, everyone realizes they're responsible for customer success throughout the journey.
I love hearing that because that's something that we are doing a lot of talking about too, is just the importance of the executive team engagement with customers in whatever form that means, whether it's strategically engaging through a customer advisory board, whether it's being involved in the customer success journey. As you mentioned, Tony has tons of stories about how that filters down all the way to the user level and customer experience, and having that executive support for the initiatives that they're trying to do, and that includes budgeting and human resources and all of those things. So I love that you brought up the point about executive support, and it's starting at the very top with the CEO. Kim, what are some of the things that are on the radar for you moving forward?
It's just really getting this across the portfolio companies, right? And even though we would say customer success is pretty new, I mean, I would say that it really started around 2014, 15. It's not new, right? And it's different than account management. And a lot of companies that I've been working with, they'll say, oh, we have customer success, but it's an account management function within the sales organization, which is very, very different than what customer success is, and building those and retaining those loyal customers. So I would say on the horizon is educating and understanding that you should be focusing on business outcomes and not and being strategic, as you had highlighted earlier, Tony.
Is that really the biggest difference between account management and customer success, is the focusing on the business outcomes versus just making sure that everything's working okay?
Absolutely. I would say that's one of the main things is focusing on those outcomes, because sales does want to solve a problem for you, right? And they're selling you something to solve that problem, but then there's no one focused on helping the customer realize that value, right? And realize those outcomes. And again, I think some of the folks at these portfolio companies that have these teams, they're just saying, okay, I'm just preventing churn, but they're preventing churn by working on renewals. And it's not about that. Again, it's really focusing on what is your solution providing the customer, and what does the customer consider success?
It's really interesting because it's more than just ease of use and some of the experience things that, we've really been focused on for 20 some years now in the customer experience world. But when you talk about education as one of the leading differences in customer success and focusing on that, that's really about transformation. That's really about teaching people new skills, new capabilities, maybe teaching them about what the software can do, but teaching them how they can use it for their benefit to achieve those goals that, at whatever level they are in the business, that they're achieving that particular goal. So it goes up all the way to the top of the company. I think it's fascinating to start talking about this from that transformational perspective and say, we truly are. Customer success is pushing us beyond the experience economy into what Pine and Gilmore called the transformation economy. The people, our customers are the products now. And as we educate them, they go from being the raw material to the finished product. They become skilled in a new way. They can achieve new things. And a lot of times what I'm finding, there's a lot of coaching that goes into this process as well. And so it's even that personal development world that's been around for many years now. There's an element of really that type of flavor to customer success when it's done right. Was that what you've seen as well?
Absolutely. And I would say that goes hand in hand with what you haven't talked about, because we talked a lot about the engagement model, is having those insights, right? And not only rallying the company around the customer journey, but what insights do you have? How do you know if the customer's healthy, right? And another thing that I'm seeing with my portfolio companies is they're taking the inside view out. Like, I need to do this, and we need to do this, and that makes a healthy customer. And I'm challenging them to test that, right? So let's look at what your insights you're gathering, and are those showing that a customer that churned, would that showed up as red? Would that have really showed up as red? And the ones that you think are healthy, and do these insights showing that it's green, right? Making sure you have those right indicators, insights, those predictions to show the right health, and taking that outside in view. And that's the difference of how people need to look at things as well.
It's a great perspective to have. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and I really have enjoyed this conversation because it's one that Betsy and I have had to some extent already about strategic customer success. But I think we've just taken it to a whole new level. And I particularly like the point about focusing on the business outcomes with education. How do we help the customer achieve that? That's one of the biggest things that I think I pulled out of today's interview. What about you, Betsy?
Same. I think, as I mentioned, just that executive focus that filters all the way down through the organization, I just think is so key to making sure that you're getting the business outcomes for your customers. And I think sometimes there's so much focus on getting your own business outcomes that you forget that the way you get your own business outcomes is to focus on your customers' business outcomes. So I really enjoyed that piece of it.
If there's one thing we can leave the audience with, one thing that you really want them to hear, what would that be?
Stay strategic. Understand how customers want you to engage. Again, something that I see is being really pulled down into the tactics of making sure customers' support problems get solved. That's not what a customer success manager should be. Stay strategic, understand the success plans, and move forward. Sorry if it's a broken record, but that's the important part.
No, I think it's important to repeat because that is key. Kim, on our show, we love to give our guests an opportunity to give a shout out to a nonprofit or a charity or some organization that's really doing good things for the community. That's really important to both of us to share on our show. So is there an organization that you'd like to talk about a little bit and that we can share the link to their website in our show notes?
Absolutely. Actually, I learned about this foundation, Be Like Brit, this nonprofit foundation, from a former colleague of mine at Click Software. Her niece, her family started this nonprofit organization. It serves the children of Haiti. This was started by the family where this 19-year-old girl went over with her college to work with children of Haiti and saw how happy they were, and they didn't have anything. And in unfortunate circumstances, she died in the 2010 earthquake while she was over there. But the day before this earthquake happened, she had texted her parents and said, I want to start an orphanage, and I want to live here and start an orphanage for these kids. And the family made that happen. So there's a 19,000 square foot home that 66 kids, children from Haiti live in, and they help and build the future of Haiti with these children. So that's something I can stand behind.
What an amazing story, and what a great legacy for their daughter. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for telling us that story. We will definitely be sure to put the link in the show notes so that anybody that's interested could learn more and possibly support that organization.
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Kim, what is the best way for people to contact you if they want to reach out to you?
I'm on LinkedIn as Kim Moceri, and or I can be found even through Francisco Partners website. So feel free to link me in, and I'll be happy to connect.
Great. Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I think this was such a great conversation. So much really, really important, robust information that you shared with us. So thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
I think this interview is one of the most significant ones we've done, at least in a long time. And I say that because the focus on strategy, we've heard that word so many times in this episode. I'd love to go back and count how many times. But the strategic focus that a CEO needs to have, and that the customer, whether it's customer support or customer success, whichever role that is, that VP, that director, they have got to be thinking at that strategic level. They've got to be thinking about it from, as Kim said, top down. Because if they think from bottom up, they're never going to get to strategy. They're just going to get caught up in the day-to-day reactive, fixing problems, and they're never going to get out of that mode.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny little mental graphic that you can come up with, top down and outside in. Just to get to the core of everything, you got to go top down and outside in. And I think she hit that point so well and so articulately, if that's a word, to really stress the importance of that. And I think now more than ever, as things have changed so much, and understanding what was strategically important to your customers a year and a half ago may be very different today, and how much more meaning that has now post-COVID.
And she also hit, and she said this several times, about education. And I think that, once you know what the business, outcomes that your customer desires, once you understand strategically how you can deliver those, then it's about really educating. She threw out there, webinars and training and all kinds of different ideas very quickly. But if we went in depth with that, we could discover that there's a lot of things that companies can do, even if they're not in a customer success mode or they're not a technology company. There's a lot of things they can do to help their customers be successful and achieve the goals that their customers want.
Yeah, exactly. And it is the whole proactive thing. Just, you've got to constantly be focused on that. Yeah, I thought it was a wonderful, wonderful interview. And I know you share the sentiment that we're very grateful that she took the time to spend with us today.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for another episode of the Really Know Your Customer podcast. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye, Tony.
Bye, Betsy.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodo.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.